Hello, everybody. My name is Sergio Araneda, and I am a second-year PhD student here at Umass in the REMP program, the program on research, educational measurement, and psychometrics. And I want to present this paper titled An Experiential Approach to Test Design and Validation. I'm very, very, very happy and honored to be part of this celebration to Edmund Gordon. Every time I know more about Edmund Gordon's research, I feel admired and happy, really happy to be part of this. So this paper starts from certain observation about game-based assessment. Game-based assessment is this idea of using games to assess, to do some test or inference about the person. There were many authors that started to do that, like Christian DiServo, Valerie Chute, Bob Mislevy, and others that started to build these devices that are kind of hybrid, and it looks like a game, but it also has some assessment layer. And an interesting thing is that it started to happen this cross-pollination, like exchange of practices from test design and game design. And in this cross-pollination, actually, it can happen in two directions. It can happen that you bring elements from test design to design a game, but also it can happen on the other side, that you bring elements from game design to design a test. So in one case, you generate game-based assessment that still looks like a game, but it has some testing logic inside. And on the other, you see a test, but the way that it is presented is as it is a game, or it was designed as if it was a game. So the experiential approach is all about the second branch, the idea of bringing ideas from game design into test design and the design of any test. And one very obvious difference between game design and test design is the centering around the experience. So in the experiential approach, basically we're proposing to center now the design of any test on the experience that is generated by a test. Here in this idea of the experience, we can define, you can do a gamified test, but also we can do a test that has other type of experience, some more cultural sensitive experience, or protect low scorers on their experience, or engagement sometimes. You can define some experience that you want to generate and design the game so it generates that type of experience. And hopefully kids are going to be happy. Hopefully we're working to have that. So one thing that is included in the paper is a conceptual framework about experience. So we want to be more careful with what do we mean with the word experience. So basically we did some literature review, and in these ideas about the concept, we found a very rich framework. So there are like three principles, two and a third that is actually mentioned by authors referring to the a principle of continuity, a principle of interaction, and a principle of making sense. The principle of continuity means that the experience is lived as a continuum from past experiences and with the expectation with future experiences. The principle of interaction means that there is no experience without interaction with the environment. The principle of making sense is that we make sense of the experience. There is some sort of process behind that we use to make sense of the experience. So in particular, about the making sense of the experience, we can define like levels of making sense, like how much we have processed some thing that happened. So the free stream is the level of the experience when you don't have any processing, and you just live in the moment, free stream of information, self-talk, no processing. Immediate is when you have certain level of processing. Integrative is when you have a more structured processing. Actually, you can have a story or some narration with a beginning and an end. Co-integrative refers to this idea that actually the experience can be co-constructed. Like the experience can be affected by how others are living their experiences, and we can make sense of the experience together as a group. And the dialogical refers to this idea that if we can co-construct, we can also co-construct our experience in a dialogue with the designer of the test. So this dialogical level is this co-construction, but specifically with the designer. In terms of the interactions, we define 5 types of interactions that definitely are not exhaustive, but are, in our opinion, are enough for testing. Fluent, automatic reactions in response to the test, cognitive interactions like the cognition, emotional, again, emotions, expressive, opinions or acts of self-expression that happen in reaction to the test, and physical, something that is anchored in the body in reaction to the test. And finally, we define like stages in the assessment process or testing process. Ante refers to when you don't even think about preparing to the test. Pre, when you're preparing to the test. Zero, when you're doing the test. Interpose, when you are waiting for the results. Pause, when you receive the results. And long term, like after you receive the results, in a long time after receiving the results. So all this framework actually can allow us to map the experience in some way, like to locate it. And here we put a table of the best methods that actually can serve to study each type of interaction and level of experience. What we typically do in assessment that we call the response process is here on this side of the table. It's more about the free stream and immediate experience, is more on the cognitive, can be repurposed to study the expressive and emotional, but typically we do the cognitive actually. Fluent eye tracking, for example, that's part of the fluent on the free stream level. And we have all these other boxes that we don't study too much. And actually we propose in the paper that the category of user experience can be a better category to refer to this type of studies because it extends response process and actually include a lot of things that are very important. Actually, the dialogical level of the experience in testing is something that we don't study really much. So yeah, and I think it's important. Here, I put some tweets that I found in the context of another research, actually in this idea of studying the dialogue between examinees and test agency. They start to see how people interact in Twitter in Chile with the test agency that does the test used for college admission. So here's this tweet. I am in crisis because I'm taking the PTU, that is the name of the test, on Monday, and an emoji. So here is a clear emotional interaction. It's in on the pre-experience. I put this integrative. However, if you're writing this on Twitter, you are looking for co-construction. But definitely, still there is no co-construction. You are looking for it. So from here, we can know that there was this type of interaction on this level of experience. Here, there's another tweet that is more referring to, it's like a criticism to the test agency because they did the test during the pandemic in person. And this student is asking why the test is not online. So this is, in my opinion, an expressive interaction, again, in the pre-experience on the integrative level. However, this is a question directly to the test agency. So eventually this can be understood as part of the dialogical experience. However, in my opinion, this is still not dialogical because the test agency hasn't responded yet. And it will become part of the dialogical if either definitely didn't respond or if it says something. And it makes you change the way that you see things happen. So one interesting thing in all of this is that, is it possible that all invalidity can be detected from the study of user experience? Because it's so wide. So maybe it is possible. Construct irrelevant variance, we believe so. It seems likely. Construct underrepresentation can be more tricky, but if we include teachers or experts and we study their experiences, actually that can be good enough to detect construct underrepresentation. Also, construct underrepresentation can be generated by the students themselves if they believe there is a part of the construct that is not being considered. Actually, this entails a lot with the ideas of cultural validity and the ideas of extending the construct. So if it is possible that any invalidity can be detected from the study of the experiences, then we can define an approach to validation. And we will call to this the experiential approach to validation. And this approach basically means that works in this way. You study user experience in depth with our conceptual framework, levels of experience, stages, types of interaction. Then you define invalidities, and you define, invalidity hypothesis. from the user, from the study of user experience. And for each invalidity hypothesis, then you do further inquiry to see if you can refute or not refute those claims. And finally, all of these you present to the communities affected by the use of the test and defend your case. So still, this is like the K-inverse-based argument approach. The argument is written as a proof by contradiction in math. So you start by assuming the opposite of you want to prove, and you try to find a contradiction. In our case, try to refute some of these invalidity hypotheses. And all this approach is the more theoretical foundation, and this is actually a second paper that I'm writing for my comps paper that explains in more detail the theoretical foundations of this experiential approach. It's based on the literature that I could find in one in one course I take with the anthropology department, in the anthropology department about community-based research. And many ideas here, situated knowledges, is a big part of the theoretical foundation of all this approach. Here I put an internal joke, a little Frankenstein, because Steve started to have some conversation, very interesting conversation with some author. And this author, he was against the idea of including values in validity. And he says that our framework here that includes consequences, for example, ask about more ethical questions, he called that a Frankenstein. So yes, it is a Frankenstein. Actually, it's not a Frankenstein. We are doing ethico-onto-epistemology. We're mixing the three things. And those are not separated. So yeah, part of that spirit is in our approach. The situated knowledges, the main core thing about the situated knowledges is this idea that researchers are human beings in the world that they are observing. And to pretend that we can do research like God, seeing from everywhere and not being there, that's delusional. That doesn't exist. And I put this quote that I love, and actually Haraway speak about what she called God tricks, this idea of pretending that we can do science like gods. We are not like that. We are human beings. I put this picture because this is a very obvious way of like the researcher in the world affected by the world that he's trying to observe. This is a definition of validity in this experiential approach. This is work in progress. And we define validity in this way as the degree to which scientific inquiry, theoretical rationales, and values of the affected communities support the appropriateness, adequacy, and preferability of the test on its purpose, interpretation, and uses done by a researcher in a situated evaluative judgment. So here we are including 4 core elements in this concept of validity. Positionality, for a lack of a better word, maybe it should be situatedness. Appropriateness, adequacy, and preferability. And basically, we're proposing first that when you acknowledge that you are partial, at least you should explain how you are going to respond to these 4 questions. What's my positionality? Is it appropriate to use the test, which is a more ethical question? Is it adequate to use the test, which is a more scientific question? And why I do prefer to use this test over other tests that may be also appropriate and adequate, what we call the preferability question. And in our approach, positionality, just the classical check on positionality. Appropriateness, we define appropriateness as the test is appropriate if the values of the test matches with the values of the affected communities by the uses of the test. We go in a different direction from Messick, that he does like a sum of pros and cons. No, we check on correspondence of values. Adequacy, the more classical definition, but we include this idea of construct and definition. And preferability, we include here the idea of an experience requirement. And here in the appropriateness question is when we are very partial, because here we are advocating for self-determination, for democracy. This is not impartial, this is partial, and we acknowledge that we are partial in this approach. So, and at the end, in the more concrete, when we do this experiential approach, we look for these 5 types of invalidities or ways that the argument can go wrong. Value rejection is when there is a difference in the values from a user with the values of the test. And unattained experience requirement is when we cannot do the experience requirement that we wanted to do. And all of these configures what we call an experience-centered design, that basically you enter in a dialogue with the users and you define your test through this process of validation using the experiential approach. Here's some reference, and this is the presentation. Thank you very much. I know it is a lot, but yeah, sorry. I tried to make it fit in 15 minutes, so yes. Thank you.